Becky coming and the work that's been done on the policy. Council, just so you know, the policy is something that's been in the works for some time, talking about when we accept art, when we look to go out to try to bring art into the community. What's that process? What's that selection? How do we then also, when it may be time to decommission art, what does that look like? And making sure we have a policy for that. So we have been working on that. We have things in place. Also within the policy is a work group, an art work group. Some of that will be staff members, but also a couple members in the art community that we would want part of that work group when doing the legwork and presenting back to you a recommendation for artwork or selection or location. All those things still come back to you, but I'll let Becky probably start, and then Jen can kind of fill in how our process was internally when we worked on the policy. You just have to hold it, Becky. Sorry.
Well, I don't. I see. Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight, and thanks for working on this policy for the City of Auburn. I'm really pleased that you folks are progressing with this public art initiative. Very briefly, Phil gave a good background. How we have come here is you were part of a grant that we received from the Maine Arts Commission for some pieces of public art that were installed over the last couple of years. You have Bud Form that is here at the head of the Great Falls going over the bridge. And we learned a lot during that installation, and I think that's why we really see why communities need to have policies. The spectrum is wide. Some communities have no policy, and things come randomly, and from random comes, decisions that aren't consistent, and then the community's never fully happy. And some communities have such strict policies that they either prevent public art or they use it as a very strategic lever to increase economic development, to do wayfinding. So cities and communities really need to have policies that work for them. So where we started was I drafted some best practice gleaned from many communities across the country and Canada that are similar in size to Lewiston Auburn. And in full disclosure, I've done this work for Lewiston as well, and LA Arts is supporting my work through the remainder of the grant that brought some of the bigger pieces we had installed I just mentioned a couple of years ago. And that draft process came here to staff and got a lot of feedback. I redrafted it with Auburn's particular interests in place, and then it has been given back to staff for them to take it to the next level. And that's where we are tonight, and I just wanted to give you an update on the fact that we're still moving forward. And Jen and the team have been working really hard on making it work for Auburn. The working group is the recommendation that would be appointed by City Council, would make recommendations to the city manager. And the most important pieces of a policy for public art are ensuring that you have a fair process in place to put out the bid for works of art. You are able to be clear with artists what your expectations are and what your expectations are for them in terms of maintenance and budget and installation and safety and all of the component parts that make public art as integrated in communities as other pieces of infrastructure. So I'm really pleased that the draft I've seen that's come back from staff has a lot of public works review, and so everyone that would be touching this work as it's both conceived and installed and maintained has had some opportunity to think through what works for Auburn. So I'll stop there and let Jen fill in other parts of the inside.
Well, we have been working on this. As you know, I am involved with the public art policy because part of the downtown revitalization plan includes public art. So I am working with city management to spearhead this, and having learned just recently with the Rose unveiling, having a clear policy in place would have been a great starting point for me, having tackled something kind of toward the tail end of that project, just to know and understand all the pieces that had happened before. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work on this policy. We're still working on some things. We learn as we go, and we will be bringing it back.
So council, it's not the way this policy is, it's set up that it's a policy that you've given me direction to put in place, and so that's what's happening. What comes back to you is knowing that when you take a look at the policy, you'll see that there's a process for any final decision on art, selection, location, cost, that always comes back to you. So that's the way that the policy is set up. We still have one more added piece that we're working through, and that's regarding murals, I think. And so, so we just want to make sure we get that right. We're kind of working that through. That'll be in addition to the policy, but we'll make that clear. I don't know, Becky, do you have anything on the murals piece?
Yeah, murals are a particular issue in Maine because of the billboard law, and that's unique to Maine. And so there's a lot of state legislation that guides installation of murals in terms of them merging into signage. So departments have to be very cognizant of what those rules and regulations are. It gets blurry. If you were in Portland anytime recently and have seen on the side of the Oakhurst building, there's milk trucks. It's pretty clear what they do inside that building. But indeed, you do have levels of restrictions around murals that are different here than they are in other states. So those policies need to have some clarity. And that's good that you're taking time to make sure that works.
There's no other questions, then I think we're all set. We'll make sure that once this is finalized, it'll be available on the website. We are, if you recall, we did move forward with PAR DMS as the software system that we're using for policies, which means there's a external portal for the community to be able to go on and look at any policy within the city. That'll be an access so that the citizens can have that. There's an internal process on policies so that, as Jen was saying, all the directors were able to go through that, make comments, additions, changes, whatever it might have been. So there's a good process that's in place. Any policy that has to do with someone's responsibility within their employment, then they have to sign off on those too. So make sure that they're aware of that. All right, I think we're good. Yep.
When you talk about like signing off on this, I mean, a final recommendation that's not a draft, will there be time for public input so that they may offer a change or verbiage or something?
So the policy, no. So the policy is currently, unless the council directs me that you want to do that, you want to have a public process point on this, but the policy is just driven by staff and outside support and that. But I think there was initially probably through Becky's work, but the actual final, there isn't.
Right, well, the current draft, as I understand it, calls for a public art working group,
That's right.
which would be a layer of citizens with expertise between the artist, and the staff and council. So there would be a vetting process through which reporting would go back up to the city managers. I understand what's being drafted
That's right.
as your policy, which is fairly consistent across the country, that there's a group of folks in a community that have both expertise and interest in public art. And of course, remember, public art is not always stone sculpture. We can be talking about, as we just said, murals, music, lighting. I mean, so you want to have folks appointed to that committee who really understand all the variables. So I think the trust you place in that committee, essentially, Councilor Gary, is where you will want to make sure you have people that serve on that group, which I believe you do appoint.
So no, that'll be, it's
staff.
basically by staff
Sorry.
positions. Yeah.
But that's where I think the work really happens, is making sure that you have folks who understand kind of what's coming forward as ideas and being able to translate those into installations.
Just a quick comment. I think it's commendable that we're actually trying to adopt a policy. I'm old enough to remember the rusted machinery parts that people argued about, so then they painted them different colors, and people argued about that. And then we had the nice wall, the mural on Main Street that was done by the alternative high school. I'm sorry. The alternative high school artwork, but then it failed. It started to deteriorate. So I don't think we had a policy on that, and now we have nice photographs. But we need a policy.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's breaking out on you. I can see you pushing the button, but so I think that, I think the art wall is probably a good example of, when that was introduced to you, that would be changing out every 6 months or something like that. And it's been 10 years and that has not changed at all. So policy would say, if that's the expectation, then there's a system in place that's put in to make sure that's changed out. I think that what you'll see, what I will recommend moving forward, is that you need to be allocating funds for maintenance. And so, but my thing is, I'd rather do small incremental amounts that builds a budget, builds that ability to be able to do that, rather than come forward and say, by the way, we have to do X, Y, Z, and it's $30,000 to refurbish, the Edward Little statue or whatever it is, So I think that we can make sure that we're putting a good system in place to make sure that happens. Back to your question though, Councilor Gary, your question was specifically about the policy. So no, on the public does not have that. We won't have any open forum for that. But I believe that, what Becky said was that you'll have public that's involved, especially the art community, on that work group. That'll be the difference.
And final say by the council. So that makes sense. Councilor Walker?
That's right. Yeah.
If we had public comment, I don't think we'd ever have, in this country, I don't think we'd have ever any art. I mean, if we opened up the Statue of Liberty to public comment, I'm sure that would have gotten shot down.
But I also think it should come to us before final decision's made. I mean, we should be abreast that, something's coming, and so we can offer our input. Because what happened to the Bud, I think that's what you call the pretty art thing over here, that was supposed to go into Anniversary Park. And Councilor Walker and I looked at each other and said, hey, it's a great piece, but that don't fit in Anniversary Park. And we asked what the second one was, and you said a fish. And we said, that's right, that's good. Because it's close to the river and everything.
I think that's gonna be in the policy. That came in the final.
Yeah. Yeah, that won't change. That'll come back to you.
Yeah, the way communities use this most effectively is when you have a strong working group, the council and staff will create some vision for areas of the community where they'd like to see public art. So it won't be as random as people just suggesting, I want to drop a piece of art in your community and may I? It'll be, gee, we're refurbishing a certain part of the downtown and we would like to see some wayfinding that's public art driven, like signage through, or overpasses or whatever. And so that's the back and forth where this policy will work, because the guidance will come from staff or this council to the working group. We're looking for certain things, so they'll have some parameters where they can work. And that will prevent, that in that instance, I think a community-driven idea could be, we'd like something around the river that reflects the river. That would be some guidance for the committee.
So Mayor, I'd recommend the other two items on the workshop just be moved to the council meeting.
Yeah, actually, looking at it, we will move those to the council. We're gonna start off with a heating assistant program. We'll keep that within the order that it lies in the meeting. I'd like to move the stage purchase up to communications. It will be a latter agenda item, but that way we'll have a little bit of distinction. You have heard about your heating assistance program already. Councilor Walker brought that up during your last meeting. And I think that's a pretty clean-cut topic that we can incorporate in the order.
Okay.
So that said, our workshop's over. We've got about 6 minutes before our regular council meeting.
Thank you, Ben.
And thank you very much, Jen and Rebecca, for doing this. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, I can take them back. Councilors, I can take these back if you want.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
Yeah. No, that's easy.
Call attention, or like to open this City Council meeting December 5th, 2022. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And before we get going, I'd just like to thank the former Mayor Pro Tem, Steve Meltzer, covering in my absence last meeting. I appreciated that. I actually watched the meeting. You did an okay job. We have one consent item on tonight's agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Councilor Staples, second for Councilor Walker. Sir, a vote by show of hands. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Next are the minutes of the November 21, 2022 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? I'll entertain a motion at this time to adopt those minutes.
Motion to accept.
Got Councilor Walker, second.
Second.
Second for Councilor Staples. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Next on the communications. Turn it over to the manager for communications on staff responses to the SNRB.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So the staff response to the SNRB questions are in your packet. They were also made available to the SNRB board. The board will be meeting Thursday afternoon. I think it's at 4:30. And so they'll be looking at that response and preparing their final recommendations to the planning board.
Very good. Also, at this time, I'd like to invite up Jonathan Labonte from our Transportation Department to give us a overview of the St. Lawrence Atlantic Railroad, the Berlin subdivision.
Let's see if that'll show up on the screen. Is that Jim back there gonna make that change? Here we go. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I appreciate a few minutes of your time to give you an update and a recommended position for the city on the review of the state-owned section of the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railroad line from Auburn to Portland. There was a memo in your packet. Just a little bit of context. In 2021, there was legislation passed that allowed for the establishment of rail use advisory councils. It was something that was advocated for primarily by trail advocates looking to use state rail corridors for conversion to trail. The State's Rail Preservation Act mandates that any trail conversion be labeled interim. The state does not want to abandon any of those corridors. Any recommended non-rail use would require the full legislature to approve of that. So the council work that's being undertaken right now would simply make a recommendation to Commissioner Van Note. He would then have to take further action to the legislature. The process to review what could happen with this corridor, I want to note that there's other DOT planning efforts that are happening outside of this, which has created some challenge to put this rail corridor in context because this group has not been privy to the other state planning efforts. Those include the state's long-range transportation plan through 2050, the state's rail plan, the state's transit plan, and the state's active transportation plan, in addition to the ongoing Portland to Auburn and Lewiston passenger rail study. So all these long-range planning efforts are happening, and the group looking at the future of this corridor has not been briefed on any of those. To orient you and certainly folks watching, sort of the southern Maine rail corridors, so you can see where Auburn's positioned. The corridor's labeled PARI, that was formerly Pan Am, that's now CSX. SLR is the short line that connects from Montreal and the Canadian National to Auburn and Auburn's Intermodal down to Danville Junction. What's labeled between Auburn and Portland as MDTT, it's hard to read there in the orange, is the state-owned portion of the St. Lawrence and Atlantic line. It's known as the Berlin subdivision. It was the section of the Grand Trunk line that ran through Berlin, New Hampshire, hence the name. And TI shown there in Portland is part of that line, but it's actually leased by the Maine Yacht Center for movement of boats seasonally. Here's a quick look at the Berlin subdivision. It starts just south of Danville Junction, where the CSX and St. Lawrence freight lines come together, and it runs to the Ocean Gateway Terminal. There's an old swing bridge in Portland that's inoperable, so that it's sort of severed. Just some highlights of this corridor. Folks that have been watching rail efforts in Lewis and Auburn for a long time will be familiar with some of this. The state acquired this line in two transactions in 2007 and 2010. It was directly related to both an I-295 study that was ongoing, as well as the state's decision to extend the Downeaster to Brunswick. Part of the political negotiation was that the Downeaster would next be extended to Auburn at the Auburn Airport, and owning this line gave the state a dedicated corridor to do so. So in 2006, the airport master plan endorsed that strategy. In 2007, DOT actually secured a federal permit to construct that passenger intermodal facility at the airport off Kitty Hawk. And the 2010 Interstate 295 study again called that out. For those who go back a little bit further, the former Silver Bullet Express, or the ski train, actually ran on this corridor. There was a park and ride lot in East Deering in Portland, and it ran to Bethel seasonally for 4 years. So there's, as I highlighted in the memo, there's three potential uses for this corridor that haven't really been fully vetted, that have a direct influence on Auburn's economic development strategy. One is passenger rail, or generally passenger uses. This quickly shows you the concept of using part of that St. Lawrence and Atlantic line to reach the Auburn proposed intermodal facility at the airport, as well as on the right, the actual layout that was included in the state's federal permit and conceptually shown in the airport master plan. Again, these were concepts that were AvCog, Auburn, Lewiston, Auburn Airport, and DOT priorities up until 2010. More recently, the corridor is referenced as being used to extend passenger rail under ongoing studies. There was the 2018 study that the City Council here partially funded, and there's an ongoing study that Lewiston and Portland invested in, looking at the economics. Those studies still hold use of part of that rail corridor for passenger use. Previous studies had also considered the opportunity to use that corridor for buses, something called bus rapid transit, where you could run a bus along that rail line, and because it would be separated from traffic, you could have predictable headways, and you wouldn't run into congestion on either the Turnpike or 295. From a freight perspective, this is part of the challenge. Every community from Portland to Auburn has a seat at the table, but only Portland and Auburn really have land use plans that support any type of manufacturing, industrial, or logistics use. North Yarmouth, Cumberland, Falmouth really are not interested in any type of rail use. They have almost expressed their sole interest in seeing a trail on the rail line. So there's been some conflict in understanding economic development strategies at either end. Some of the options for use of that corridor south of Auburn, which is not active right now, it last served B&M Baked Beans back in the mid-2010s, CSX, being a Class 1 railroad, is primarily interested in long-haul movement. They're not interested in making the short movements that, say, a St. Lawrence might. Given the activities along the Rockland branch to, say, Dragon Cement, or the growth of the Port of Portland and the shipping with Ameskip, you could envision a future scenario where the St. Lawrence and Atlantic secured operating rights on the CSX over short runs, and then could move products from either Rockland, the coast, or the Port of Portland to the Auburn intermodal or other industries located in Auburn. None of those scenarios have been fully evaluated yet, but obviously those would come off the table if that line was converted to a trail and the rail lines removed. And lastly, from an active transportation standpoint, there's every reason to support looking at the potential of regional trail connections. The East Coast Greenway is now recommended to make a move from Portland to Auburn and Lewiston. I included a link to those plans, in this vision of a bike ped triangle between Portland, Auburn, Lewiston, and Brunswick, which certainly would be an attraction. The challenge right now is advancing one vision over others that could have a more profound economic impact, both with movement of people and movement of goods. So with all that said, my recommendation, and if there's support for that, and I can certainly answer any questions, would be I would prepare a resolve for the Auburn Council. I would encourage you to take a position on behalf of the city of rail with trail, which would be a scenario where the state could advance co-locating a trail using this right-of-way between Auburn and Portland, but that the transportation corridor itself of the rail line be preserved, and hopefully a more directed use of that for economic benefit could be advanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labonte. Yeah, and we've had conversations about this on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation as well. Unless there's some objections here, adamant objections from the council, I'd like to see something like this prepared for further debate and discussion amongst the council on whether or not to support the dual-use trail program, trail rail. Fair enough, council? Okay, very good, thank you.
We'd probably look at the 19th agenda, the Rail Use Advisory Council's meeting December 22nd to start to make recommendations. I just want to make sure I represent the city's position fully.
Nope, very good, thank you. Next on the agenda, I'm going to bring up Assistant City Manager Mr. Wood to talk first and foremost about further agenda item on tonight's agenda, which is our stage procurement. It's something that was going to happen in the workshop, but we did not have enough time. And while Mr. Wood is working on bringing that up, I just wanted to relay some communication I had from constituents about Santa and his sleigh and whether or not he pays excise tax. It was on the house. That was an awesome joke, I think. Mr. Wood, I killed as much time as I could.
Thank you.
That was pretty fun.
I appreciate it. Mayor and council, good evening. What I'm presenting to you is something that you guys have all seen or talked about previously over the past several years with regards to the purchase and use of a portable stage with the creation and success of New Year's Eve Auburn, and with the continued increase in the number of events that the city is hosting, as well as events that the school is hosting. It's become clear that purchasing a portable stage that we tend to rent annually would be very much in the interest of the city. It's something that we looked at previously. Obviously with COVID, a number of things changed, but we are continuing to increase the number of events that the city is hosting. So the staff at the city has reached out to a number of vendors that we have worked with previously to look at and identify stages that would best suit the need for the city and would also be ideal for internal operations. So these are just a couple of pictures about the use and design of the stage that we are looking at, which is a 24 by 20. So when I initially heard that, I was wondering if that was really going to be large enough, but when I thought about it and when it was explained to me, that's essentially 2 stories, and when you can see it here, it's a pretty good sized stage, and should the city decide at a later date that there's additional expansion that's needed, that's something that we'll be able to purchase. So just a couple of pictures so you could see what it could look like for graduation, kind of a New Year's Eve Auburn-esque kind of feel. This is what it looks like all packed up. So this is something that Public Works will be able to transport easily, something that we'll be able to store easily since storage is a premium. These are the kind of stages as it's being unpacked. You can see what it would look like in each phase. With the purchase of this stage would come additional training as well for 3 days, so that staff is fluent in being able to manage, set up, tear down, and work with third-party vendors for various events. It's just another design of what it looks like. And so ultimately, just a couple of things for us to take into consideration. Annually, the city budgets about $60,000 for stage rental each and every year. So this stage that we're looking at with additional accessories and training and delivery is approximately $168,000. So the ROI on this would be a little under 3 years. And to think about it a little bit differently, the life of this stage is anticipated to be minimum 25 years. So if you reverse that, we would be saving a net savings of about $1.3 million. Now, that's not including some maintenance, but I think it's safe to say that there's a significant savings by purchasing this over the life expectancy of the stage. That also doesn't take into account the opportunities here for additional events, for opportunities for us to use this as an in-kind donation for, Make-A-Wish event or some other events that, this city is able to partner with nonprofit organizations for gift in kind. There's also an opportunity, should the council deem it appropriate, to rent it out for a fee, since we will be trained and have the capability to set it up and tear it down ourselves. One thing to note, this does not, so some of the pictures you saw earlier, you saw the sound equipment and the lights and so forth. This comes with all the structures needed for those vendors to be able to set those things up. It does not have the light and sound with it, and typically that's something that we rent with the DJ or sound technician that we contract with. But that's pretty standard, but to have all of that included so that it's easy to set up and tear down for those vendors is a huge plus. I would open it up for questions or comments.
Council, yes.
Yeah, so is this coming to us tonight as a workshop item and as an agenda item in the hopes that we might be able to purchase this before New Year's, Auburn?
No, so we had hoped in a perfect world that somebody might have ordered one and decided not to move forward with it, and there might be one available. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. But because these things do have a lead time of about 2 to 3 months, this would be ideal for launching our spring series of events and rolling into the summer. Ideally, it would be here before graduation as well. So there's definitely a benefit to moving forward even within this time frame, even though it probably won't be here for New Year's Eve Auburn.
I will say, though, there's another additional opportunity. Right now, we do a lot of sponsorship. I know I'm going to local businesses asking for contributions to be a stage sponsor. Very similar to the methodology that we use with Norway Savings Bank Arena and Ingersoll. There could be a in perpetuity or an annual stage sponsor for this as well that would eat into a lot of the cost of the stage. So I think it does open up, and that's not unheard of. That happens in communities around the country. Sure. So there is some opportunities here to offset this cost, which would then flow directly in as a budget offset for hosting some of these events. And the school stage rental currently right now is running $15,000 to $20,000 for graduation. It's a very similar stage to what we have for New Year's and our fall a Brews and Blues Festival.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not saying I don't like the idea of the stage, but I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
Will this stage fit in Festival Plaza?
Yes, it will. It's the size of the stage that we've used historically for New Year's Eve Auburn.
And then you mentioned the fact that it could be rented out. Do you have a budget to handle any incidental repairs and cost of maintenance of this stage?
Sure, so the maintenance would fold into the Public Works budget as any other capital purchase would. And the renting of it to other parties is something that we're not immediately looking at, but that's something that would be further explored. But yes, it would be covered under insurance, and it would, and we would obviously adhere to the annual maintenance of it, and that will come with the 3-day training that's associated with this purchase.
Now, you mentioned 3-day training and the maintenance of it. Other municipalities or areas that buy this stage, they must have an idea of what the incidental cost, if it needs to be repaired. Have you looked at any of the, just to get a ballpark figure of what some of these incidentals may cost? And how would you budget that into our city's budget, or even a Public Works budget? And then my final question is, you talk about how it's just for the stage, it does not include the cost of the sound and lights. Now, how much would that cost incidentally on top of all this other?
Sure, I'll take the questions in reverse order. Yes, that's not inclusive of the lights and sound, and none of our events are inclusive, or stage rentals include lights and sound. That's typically a separate contract, and that's a completely different skill set usually. So that's not necessarily an additional cost. It's just not a cost that we're able to defray with this particular purchase. And quite frankly, that's probably not a business that we as a city necessarily want to get into. With regards to other communities that have purchased similar stages, I have not personally. Mark Goslin, who has spearheaded a number of our major events, has been the lead on in investigating, and has been the primary contact for both our renting of stages as well as working with our vendors to identify the best stage for our uses. He has identified that annually we would need somewhere around $5,000 to $7,000 for maintenance and ongoing training. So as we have new staff coming in, we would obviously want to train them and so forth. But that varies, right? I would imagine for the first few years, we probably won't have any incidents. And then, you know, as continued wear and tear goes on as part of the annual maintenance, what I think is really important about this particular investment is, as Phil has mentioned, city manager has mentioned, our asset management system that we're standing up. This is something that would obviously be a major investment and something that's folded in there. So that ongoing maintenance, that ability to understand when we need to make those investments is something that will be dutifully tracked. So we won't have wear and tear that's not necessarily noted or taken care of that may have happened without this particular system in place. And the other piece that's important is that Public Works will also be a part of the 3-day training and the ongoing access to information if we purchase this stage. So they'll have a strong knowledge of all the things that we should be looking for to make sure that it's operating at optimal level.
And then do you have any of the costs? Obviously, we've rented stages before.
Sure.
Do you have the cost of what it costs for the installing of sound and lights and stuff like that?
Oh, sorry, you did ask that. Certainly, it depends on the event. Obviously, New Year's Eve with the lights associated would be a very different cost than graduation in the middle of the day where you might only need a light or two. So it could range anywhere from, you know, $5,000 to $15,000 depending on what's needed. Obviously, we had a concert. In fact, a stage very similar to this was used for the concert in Norway a few years back, the Free Country concert. And so obviously that's a whole different ball game in terms of cost that was borne by the performer. So it's a wide range. So I wouldn't be able to give you a specific dollar amount for each one. Thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions? We also have this as agenda item tonight for further debate or discussion, but you can ask Brian questions now.
One last one, real quick.
Yeah, please.
So you said a savings of 1.1 roughly.
1.3, roughly.
1.3, okay. And is that over a 25-year period, or is that a
Yes.
designated time?
That's over a 25-year period, reduction for the actual cost itself. So the net would be about 1.3 million savings, not including
Over
maintenance.
25 years. Instead of renting. Right. But in an ROI, you're looking at about a 3-year payback.
Correct.
Okay.
That was my next question.
Yes.
I was just trying to
ROI.
translate one note.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this? Or, I'm sorry, Councilman?
Yeah, are we planning on doing graduation at the new auditorium?
Actually, no, at the new turf field. The auditorium as the backup rain date location, just because it seats 1,200, which is a lot. But normally each graduate, the 200 or so graduates, get 8 to 10 tickets each. So that would push it into the field. So same as we did with Walton Field, which will still be there this spring at Walton Field for graduation. Next year it will be at the new turf facility.
And how much do we spend a year for the stage rental on New Year's?
New Year's specifically is about $15,000, depending. Or so I was told.
Not counting lighting and all that stuff, just for the stage itself?
Correct, 10 to 15. Yep.
Tim? You know stages. Okay, if Councilor Walker, you had a question?
Yes, if you went out and got 3 different quotes, or you've asked somebody to give you 3 quotes or whatever.
Sure.
Why wouldn't we see the quotes and see other stages versus that 24-footer or 20 by 20? I've watched that when we've had it on Main Street. We don't need that large of a stage when we have it down on Main Street, that's for sure. You have 4 people playing at any one time inside of it, and you have speakers hanging all over it. I would guess you probably have rented the band to play, or whoever's playing, they would bring speakers in and stuff like that.
No, they don't.
So,
I will correct, they don't.
well, maybe you ought to hire some good bands and.
Counselor, with all due respect, I think we've hired some of the best in the state, and per their contracts, and we've, just for New Year's and the Blues Festival, I think we've hired a total of 15 different bands. They don't bring speakers. They only bring their instruments, and they hook up to the speakers that are provided. And they usually bring a soundboard, but that's optional. And that's all in their contracts because they just don't have that capital expense. And it's
Well,
usually sound plus everything, so-
going back to the prices and stuff
Sure.
and seeing some other ones, if we were asked to vote on this tonight, I wouldn't vote on it now because I think there's a lot more to see. And I would like to see if we had to rent, what they would charge us, not just taking the word of you or anyone else. I'd like to see what they would tell us to rent a 20-footer by 20, what it would cost us.
Sure, and what I'd say is we did go for the quote, or get the 3 quotes that's required by our contracting and procurement policy. I think one of the things that we're looking at is trying to balance the most dynamic stage, the most versatile stage, so that can meet all of our needs, both some of our larger events and then some of our smaller events as well. And typically, historically, we haven't brought those 3 different quotes, but that's something I can certainly circle back with you on, Counselor.
Again, this is going to be a topic, and, just hearing it, I mean, if we need to send staff back with more information requests, we can always table this out and look at it. I think we have a nice window here.
Yep.
I'm glad staff brought this together, but if there's more information the council wants to see, you always have the ability to table an item until that information is presented to the body. Okay? Is there any other questions before we move out?
One, does this stage attach to the trailer? Does it come off from the trailer? Is it separate from the trailer?
No, it's mounted onto the trailer. The trailer is the base for the stage, and then you have obviously the supports on the side, and then the ancillary pieces, so the steps or the ramp, the hydraulics, so that you can lift all of the speakers and so forth on there. But no, it stays attached to the trailer.
And if I could just, as we're going through this, and again, if you all want to table this, I would make a recommendation to come a little bit earlier to New Year's Eve Auburn, approximately 3 to 4 when they're setting the stage up, to see the process, to see how large it is, how you maneuver it. And I know that's when I watch it for many years now, and I've learned how they work this a little bit. You know what I mean? You can actually put some scope to it if you are having a hard time visualizing size and depth. So, okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Thank you very much.
Next on is council communication. I'd just like to lead it off. And Jim, if you could hit play, I just want to show you a TV commercial that's live as of today.
This year, start a new tradition. Head to the heart of downtown Auburn for the 5th annual New Year's Auburn, presented by Emerson Toyota. Ring in a sparkling new year with fireworks, delicious craft brews, food trucks, and live music from the Jumpin' Willies, fan favorite Hello Newman, and Maine's favorite country rock band, the Mallet Brothers. Enjoy the ultimate New Year's experience. Make a resolution to start the new year at Maine's biggest and best party of the year. New Year's Auburn, presented by Emerson Toyota. Learn more at newyearsauburn.com.
I'm pretty sure it sounds better on the television. But that is a visual. I wanted to bring that up for a couple of reasons. The media buy. No event is a good event without people knowing about it. And we've been running through this actual process of getting sponsors and advertising and creating TV commercials for 4+ years now. And I just want to call out a big thanks to Emerson Toyota for being a signature sponsor at the $20,000 level. That was a very enjoyable conversation with Mr. Emerson, but we walked out with a check. So that was great. Androscoggin Bank, Neocraft Signs, I've got Procter & Gamble, our 4 signature sponsors, all together subsidized a huge, significant chunk of not just New Year's, but our Fall Blues and Brews Festival and our yet-to-be-named, though I'm hoping Lobster Festival, music and outdoor festival come May. So just big shout out, thanks. Look for that on WGMA. It's on our website and social media. Please share it. Last year in the rain, we had 5,000 people. I think this year we're going to have a lot more than that. So very exciting there. A couple other communication pieces. We need, this is to the community. Our tree lighting is this week in Festival Plaza. It's at 6 p.m. The village opens up at 4 p.m. So please, we already had a soft opening Saturday. It was actually really well attended. A lot of people came in. The vendors were extremely happy, and we didn't put any effort into it as it was a soft opening. So we're sorry we had to delay it due to the windstorm, but I think it's going to be great. Thursday, 6 o'clock. Village opens at 4. Please come and enjoy a lot of great variety there. Then also, I'll let Councilor Walker talk about New Auburn this Saturday. So there's a lot of good happiness going on. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to this side. Start with Councilor Staples, and we'll keep going.
Thank you. In light of the issues that we've been seeing in the city recently, I'd like to sponsor an order at the next council meeting if somebody would like to sign on to this with me. But I would like to see the planning board take a look at the city's zoning and to determine whether or not there is a place in their zoning for shelters.
Right now, I think, just to elaborate, our current city zoning does not allow an overnight shelter unless it's designed to house individuals of domestic violence and abuse. So that is the only carve-out within our current zoning. Correct? Okay.
Thanks.
Councilor Walker?
Yes, I guess I'll announce this Saturday coming, 5 o'clock, Santa Claus will come to the across the street from Vincent Square there in New Auburn, behind Rolly's Diner. We will have Santa Claus there to light the tree, so don't be late. 5 o'clock, we'll have McDonald's there with hot chocolate, and we'll also have the pit there, having hot dogs and stuff for all of us. So come on down, join the party.
Sullivan Park across from, next door to Raleigh's. Okay. Yep. Councilor?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Keeping going. Councilor Whiting? Councilor Gary? Okay, Mr. Manager?
Just follow up on a couple things. One, we had night out at the Hilton on Friday evening. When we started Christmas, the Christmas Villages, we had 150 vendors that had applied for those slots. We were able to make an offer through assistance from the Hilton to bring in 15 vendors. We had 11 that participated on Friday night. We had over 200 people come to the event and did meet with those vendors. These initiatives do align. We had a regional roundtable with the chamber last week. The mayor and I serve on that committee, and they do align with the chamber's goals regarding efforts that are being done for entrepreneurs, efforts being done with small businesses, efforts that we're doing to attract workforce. These are all some of those initiatives that are working towards those goals. So it's nice to be able to report out on what Auburn is doing for that. So the rest I have for the city manager's report, Mayor, so I'm all set.
Very good. Okay, I'll open this up to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any topic or issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Please step up to the podium, give us your name and address, and limit your comments, if you could, to 3 minutes.
My name is Pam Rousseau, 745 West Auburn Road. I'm just concerned about the number of realtors that are becoming more and more involved in our city and able to make a profit on the decisions that the planning board and the city council make.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak at tonight's first open session? None being, I'll close it. Okay, moving on to unfinished business, we have none. Moving on to new business, we do. It's order 157-12052022, authorizing the use of $35,000 in ARPA funds for the Auburn Heating Assistance Program. Do I have a motion? Councilor Gary, second from Councilor Walker. Okay, we're going to start off tonight with actually kind of a merging of a workshop item that got bumped with this order. Now, this is not a new topic. You all talked about it during our last meeting, so I know there's some follow-up from Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes, go.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. In your packet, you saw the kind of overview and summary of the program we put together based on the conversation at the last council meeting. We tried to make sure we created this in such a way that people would need to use other benefits for us, such as LIHEAP, if they have access to that. If they fall below the income guideline, they would have access to general assistance, and pull that all together. And we also put a little bit of an asset test in it, so if people have money, liquid cash available, then they would have to spend that before they would have access to this as well. The other piece is that we tried to pull together was the money. So we're asking for $35,000 in ARPA funds. There's $32,000 of state money that was sent to the city that we can use for this purpose. And then this all started with the courts program. Currently, the courts program, I asked Jill to pull for me the last 5 years. On average, the revenue from that program it's been $3,500 a year, and the expenditure is around $3,200 a year. We did have 1 year back in 2019 that had significantly higher revenues, which is a little over $6,000 that year. So we're recommending, and what we're planning on doing is to use no more than $5,000 from the courts program. So you put that all together, and you've got right around $72,000.
Can you give us a little, do you have any insight on what's going on in the legislature right now, the governor's office? I do believe they proposed significant amount of heating oil assistance, and I believe that's coming to a vote Wednesday at the legislature. Is there any clarity you've seen or can share with us?
I haven't got a lot of clarity other than word on the street. There's potentially a $450 check going to every household to help with heating oil as part of that, as well as the LIHEAP fund will be larger and to increase that, which is why we've pushed this that if you qualify for LIHEAP, then you have to use that first.
And the online application process for LIHEAP through Community Concepts, or in our area, it would be Community Concepts, or straight with Main State Housing is live?
The one with Community Concepts, I know they're working that now. I've talked to people at Community Concepts, and they are taking applications.
Electronically?
I can't confirm that.
Okay. I'll open this up first to people in the audience. Anybody would like to comment on this public conversation? Please step up to the podium. Name, address, 3 minutes. Anybody? Comment? None? Bring it back to the council. Council. Questions? Debate? Councilor Gary?
Mr. Holmes, you were talking about $450 to everyone. Is that to go for home heating or electricity if they heat by electricity?
My understanding it would be similar to the checks that were the $800 and whatever dollar checks that the state sent out earlier. It would just be money to help the household. Again, that hasn't passed, but that was the conversation.
Thank you.
So I think it's safe to say that, what we're doing is a proactive step, almost a backstop, just in case the legislature can't come to consensus. Yeah. And in addition to?
Absolutely. Our goal here is to backstop the other programs, not be the lead program.
Any other questions?
Just one, if we had to go back to the cards program, we could, right?
So what I would recommend is that this program caps out at $600 per household as a maximum, depending on what they're burning and using for heat. The courts program would then go back to what it was. It would be based on the criteria it always has been, which is when somebody's in need who's slightly over, but we wouldn't add it to this particular program, which will be a very systematic approach.
Anything else? No? I'm going to ask for a vote at this time. All those in favor of the order, please raise your hand. Opposed? None being passed, 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Okay, next is Order 158-12052022, disposition of a building located at 110 Hampshire Street under dangerous building statute. This is also a public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So, second.
Motion from Counselor Walker, second from Counselor, Whiting. Okay, I'll open this up to the public for hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium and state your name and address.
Hello.
Hello.
I am the owner of 110 Hampshire Street. That particular building, we have a issue with the porch at this moment. The third floor part of the porch is the dangerous part. The third floor apartments are empty and there's no access to that to keep that from being an issue. There's a lot of history with this particular property. I bought it with financing through Milk Street Capital. They closed. The owner took the escrow accounts and took off. So I ended up with a hefty mortgage, no escrow, and I have been having to figure out how to make all of these repairs by myself. I went from a $150,000 budget to whatever I bring home. So I am working with little to nothing, and I think I've done a lot with what I have. But that's what I have there.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Ma'am, could I have your name again and address? I apologize for that.
Sure. Alexandria Savard, and my mailing address technically is 46 Valley Street in Auburn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
There's quite a lot of information, about 100 pages or so in this packet, and I'm not going to ask you to regurgitate everything. It's our responsibility to read it. Public's as well. Could you give us the, 5 minute or so Cliff Notes version in summary, Chris or Eric?
I sure can. Pardon me? Can we get access?
Jim, can you transfer? Jim, just transfer the screen over to the front desk.
So I will say, over the course of approximately 2 years, we've observed and we've documented continued deterioration of the structural elements of this property, as you've all seen in the submitted documents. We've exhausted pretty much all of the efforts that we have to try to mitigate these safety hazards and a threat to the community and the people that actually occupy this building. This isn't an easy task. This isn't something we take very lightly. I'm just hoping that we can move forward today. What I'm asking for is I'm asking for you to render an order that all structures located at 110 Hampshire Street be declared dangerous buildings within the meaning of the statute, Title 17, Section 2851, and that you order the structures to be demolished within 90 days. I'm asking for 90 days. Normally we would request 30, but because there are folks that live in this particular building, I think that we have to, we have to try to work with these folks to find housing for them. Something that I want to do is I want to pull up a couple of pictures. Obviously, there's going to be some pictures that are documented that you have, but I think it's important for you to see. So these are the porches that Ms. Savard was referring to. So as you can see, like right in this area, the carrier beam's actually separating from the posts. There we go. So this section, if in the documents that we had submitted, there's particular conversations, a lot of conversations about an LVL. So that is for this particular area right here. They didn't go with an LVL, which is just a laminated veneer lumber. Basically, it's an engineered board that's designed to carry a load, distribute some weight. The problem is these sections weren't repaired, and this wall, as far up as I could tell when this section was exposed, is completely rotten. This is just more general pictures. Another picture of the beam separating here. But we want to do, so this is the top floor that Ms. Savard was actually referring to. You can see how it's leaning. It is extremely dangerous. I'm going to take you through some general pictures of the inside of the building. So there's a lot of electrical hazards that we had noted. You know, plumbing that just doesn't work quite right. These are just ceiling stains from leaking. This is caused from leaking. I'm not quite sure which apartment this is from, but this could be from the roof. And in all fairness, Ms. Savard did repair about 90% of that roof. And the pause in the notice of violations reflect that, because we were hopeful that we were going to get work completed to take the safety element out of this. So more general pictures here. So this is the top floor that's actually unoccupied due to safety issues. So this is a common theme in some of the apartments. You know, flooring's missing, holes in walls. You know, this is an occupied apartment. You can see that the type of disrepair that we're looking at here. This is a bathroom in one of the bottom floors that's completely rotted through. This is plumbing that was obviously done without a permit. So this is something that is really interesting, these pictures, and I know it's really difficult to tell. So the porches on this particular building were installed in a manner that actually allowed water to penetrate the inside of the building, which is why that wall that I pointed out was rotten. This is inside of an apartment that's actually occupied. So this was a bedroom right here. This is obviously the bedroom window. Below this is that hole that I was mentioning before. And I want to get to another picture here. So common theme, missing smoke detectors, things like that. This isn't a great picture, but it shows kind of where I wanted you to look. So this is one of the sections right here where I'm pointing. This is one of the sections where water's penetrating and causing that wall to rot. This is where, on the other side of this wall, is where the framing components are exposed and rotting on the interior due to water penetration coming through this ledger board, which the ledger was actually, well, it's not really a ledger, it's a rim joist. It was attached to the side of the building. Siding wasn't taken off, it wasn't properly flashed, which means water infiltrates behind it. Getting behind the siding and into the framing, which will cause it to rot out, which is what is occurring now. Now, this is important. In the initial notice of violation on October 20th, we didn't have under structural elements, we didn't have a deteriorated paint ordinance. That was implemented somewhere around the March 2021 range. And in all fairness, when we continued on with these citations, we didn't include it until there were new violations that actually occurred. So we started a new code case, which is going to be referenced. You can find it in the packet with all the documents that we submitted. Something that's important, there's a misconception that children get elevated blood lead levels. You know, people say chewing on the windowsills, and that's not really always what happens. We're not lead paint certified, but there's a lot of characteristics of potential lead paint here. And a lot of times children get sick by tracking it into the apartments. This particular apartment actually had young children that are living in it. That's a concern not only for the people in the building, but the people walking by in the neighborhood. This is a densely populated neighborhood with a lot of children. So there's some risk involved there for the other children in the neighborhoods. So these are, again, just random pictures of the property. So this is the front porch. Again, this is right across the street from Webster School.
Is there any other, I mean, these are all health and safety?
Yes.
Okay, there's nothing here that's just simply aesthetic?
No.
Okay. Couple
Not in my
questions if we could, and you can keep flipping through. I think the council would like to see some of that as we're talking though.
Okay.
But,
So I don't have very many more pictures because the
Okay.
rest are submitted in the packet. I mean, there was about 100 pages of documents that we had submitted for this, so I just wanted to highlight some, point some out. You know, general condition of the building, some of the things that we've been looking at and trying to work with the property owner to kind of mitigate these issues. The building is going to continue to deteriorate if we don't take some sort of action here, and this is why I'm requesting that you put an order in to consider it a dangerous building.
Chris, if I could ask,
Sure.
as you're categorizing all the deficiencies and the code violations, what's the anticipated, if you would, repair value compared to the current value that the city ascribes to it?
If I had to put a guess on this, to ballpark, my ballpark range is going to be around 200,000. Of course, that would depend on the contractors you hired, the cost of materials, time that you order it, but I'd suspect it's going to be around $200,000.
How many units?
9. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 are currently occupied.
Council, open this up. Do you have any questions that weren't answered in your packet that you'd like to ask Chris or Eric? Councilor Staples?
I wonder, you know, this is the first time I've been on this council when this type of thing has come to us. What do we have for options here legally, as far as, I know you're asking us to order the building demolished, but is there anything else that we have for an option here?
Under the dangerous building statute, you do have another option. You can change the order. If we look at the first section here, so the order may allow for the delay of disposal if the owner or parties of interest have demonstrated the ability and willingness to satisfactorily rehabilitate the building. So you can delay the order, but I would suggest that we get definitive documentation that they are capable of making the repairs and willing to do so.
And do you have an estimate of how many people are in this building currently?
I think most of the units were single family, I believe, a single person. I know there was 2 in one, and I believe 3 in another. So I'm gonna say roughly 10. And we have spoken with GA as well about potentially helping facilitate the relocation of these folks.
So if I could, how long has this process been going on? I mean, this is obviously, it's not coming out, like, it's not 30 days old.
No, so
It's been years.
this process actually, and this particular one, it started back in October of 2020 is when the first notice of violation came in. When I first started working here, I think June was the first time I've had to work with this property, and it was just basic trash removal, trash and debris and stuff. So one thing I did find pretty interesting today was the police calls. It is a little bit alarming. So, and this is only police.
Well, Chris, if I could, I mean, that is an ordinance that we have, council. We can claim a building as a dangerous building within a certain criteria of police calls. But I would like to, if the council's okay with that, looking at this right now as a health and safety issue, separate from any of the police
No
calls.
problem.
I appreciate you bringing that up, okay? Now, ma'am, Savard, correct?
Savard.
Savard, I'm sorry about that. Normally, we don't have a situation in which it's like a hearing. This is not a trial by any means. You do have legal recourse, of course, if you don't like the decision that this body does make. And I encourage you to get counsel, okay, and look at that, if that comes to that. Okay? So,
And one of the points I wanted to mention is when we did the walkthrough, I was told I'd get a list of deficiencies. And my mortgage holder told me he'd give me a junior lien and some money to work with, but I needed the complete list. And he gave me a few other things I needed to do, like the nuisance tenants I needed to get rid of and such. And he gave me some funds to be able to do that. So several of the apartments are being evicted on the 21st just because they're nuisance tenants. And I I can get a list, but I need a complete list. When you guys came last time, I did smoke detectors, some of them right in front of you, some of them when you guys left, so smoke detectors happened right away. The electrician came, I think, 2 hours after you left. So some things that we did right away. Anything that was extremely dangerous, we did right away. The third floor apartment where the porch is really sketchy, we blocked it off and we emptied the apartment and no one goes up there. It is just off access until we get there. But that's also a loss of income for me. And we're,
Ma'am, again, thank you. I bet we have to look at this on the merits of whether or not this is dangerous to be habitable.
yes.
Okay, so
part
that's,
of it is I had an electrician go in there and take care of some of the crazy stuff that we saw. And I mean, not all of it was already there. Sometimes tenants do crazy things.
understand, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So bringing this back, that we do have to make a decision, and, you know, I know this is the first time I believe this council's been in this situation. I've been in this situation, I think, with Councilor Gary and Walker now several times. Maybe Councilor Milks as well. So I'll open this up to the council. Council, we have a set of options in front of us. Does anybody want to debate those options? If not, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Approving the order. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Approving the order as written.
Counselor Staples?
Yes.
Counselor Gary? Counselor Whiting?
Yes.
Counselor Hawes?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Morin?
Yes.
Counselor Walker?
No.
The order passes 6-1. Next is Order 159-1205-2022, which is approving the liquor license for Ryan and Connor Concessions Group, LLC, DBA Ringers, located at 985 Turner Street, which is Norway Savings Bank Arena. This is also a public hearing. Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Councilor Walker, second Councilor Staples. Open this up to the public. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this issue? And this is, say DBA as, but Portland Pie's operation within Norway Savings Bank Arena and the concessions. Okay, bring it back to the council. Council debate? None being, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None being. Passes 7-0. Next is Order 160-1205-2022, allocating up to $180,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act funds for the purchase of a portable stage. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor Staples, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor Hawes. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment upon this? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. And council, based upon what I heard, I just recommend that it entertain a motion to table this vote pending further information from the city manager to a date certain, not to exceed February 1, sometime in January. That's a suggested motion versus an up or down vote at this time. I think there's more that's worthy to be explored, but that's up to you. If you don't want to do that, that's on you.
I'd just like to ask a question. If we were to do something like that, would that get us the stage in time for the next event?
4 months?
Yes, I think we should not move past January. Any decision, I think we would have the stage in time for the next major event.
So the second meeting in January is 16th. Oh, I'm sorry, yet to be determined. Oh, okay, that's right, there's a holiday. It's around the 17th, but right around there between the 17th and the 24th, if you would. Yeah. Any debate? Discussion? Motions?
I know I'd like to see a list of events that we use the stage for, and the costs.
Break down the budget.
I appreciate Councilor Walker's concern about the size, but the thing is, when you're buying something for multiple uses, you have to buy it for the largest use. So it probably will be a larger one, but I would like to see a little more work on it, and I'd make a motion to table until the second meeting of January.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilor Whiting and a second from Councilor Hawes. All those in favor of tabling the decision to the second meeting in January, please raise your hand. Opposed? None being? It's tabled to the second meeting in January, sir. And if I could add on, if there's any other points of interest or questions that you would like answered prior to that meeting, please email them directly out to Brian. Okay, so that way you can collect everything, make sure it's fully vetted. Okay, next is, hold on. Order 24-1205-2022, zoning map amendment, amending a portion of 150 Andrew Drive. This is parcel ID 347-003 from the Agriculture and Resource Protection and Low Density Country Residential Zoning Districts to the Suburban Residential as recommended by the Planning Board. So first reading and a public hearing will be held at the second reading of this item. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Staples, second from Councilor Moran. And before I open it up to the public for comment, I was talking to the city manager earlier about this. What we'd like to do is summarize, because this is kind of precedent setting actually, asking for agricultural zone to be rezoned into something other than agricultural resource protection, to first and foremost go over any and clarify the process up to this time, let the city manager do that, and then ask a series of questions to either the petitioner, or in this case the staff, kind of summarizing. And again, this is very similar to what we would do during any other type of hearing or tax abatement. Trying to get some sort of, not the end all be all, but at least a start of a process that could helpfully be modified, codified, and then followed in the future. So with that, I'll turn over to the manager to clear up some issues you brought up in the staff memo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll certainly have Eric weigh in as well. To start with, to what the mayor was referring to, as you see, and I know we've had a couple other developers that have asked about a process. Obviously, we have a process that takes place within the planning board, but the thought would be, is there a process for you as counselors on questions you'd like to have answered when these requests come back before you? And so what staff can do is we can work on an internal list of questions that we believe you may have, or questions that you might actually ask tonight regarding this property, as almost a information that you can have ahead of time. Staff can answer those, or the petitioner, or the person who owns the property could go ahead and also answer questions regarding what was the previous use of this property, what is their intent, what is their moving forward with, but also for staff, how does this property may weigh in on likelihood of use for soils, or what's the likelihood of use for traffic concerns. Things that the planning board will also review, but we want to make sure you almost have a list of items that you'll have available to you. So we'll work on that. That's been a request that came. We can take a look at it. If that's something you would like, and it could be a useful tool for you, part of that process would be staff would use it at the planning board level to go through that list as well. And so if that's something of interest, we could do that. I would like Eric to just talk through the section of the information sheet regarding process, the process regarding a planning board member who has a conflict of interest on a topic, what took place, and then council, it'll be your decision on how you like to proceed. But Eric, you want to go ahead and start?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. A zoning petition can be initiated in three ways, either by planning board, by city council, or by signatures of 25 registered voters. In this case, it was initiated by the signatures on a petition of at least 25 registered voters. City Manager Kroll also mentioned the participation of a planning board member. One of the planning board members, Brian Dubois, local real estate broker, is representing the seller of this property. Mr. Dubois asked, leading into the hearing, if he could recuse himself and still participate in the public process as a representative for his client, but not as a member of the planning board, to step down, acknowledge that he has a conflict, and join the public in the back of the room. He was advised that he could do that. The state guidance from Maine Municipal doesn't recommend it, but doesn't say that it's prohibited. After that hearing, that item being raised, we reviewed the local policies as well, and we should have advised him not to participate in that discussion. Now, the remedy for that I don't know what that is. I think the only possible real remedy would be to either acknowledge it, make sure that it doesn't happen again, or you could possibly refer this back to the planning board without the participation of Mr. Dubois, but I really don't think that that would change the process or the outcome or deliver any real value. We will make sure that it doesn't happen again. I think the downside of that is if we are being more restrictive than state law and not allowing that participation, we're probably foregoing experience and expertise that members of the public have by forcing them to choose their livelihood over participation in a public board. So I think that's unfortunate, but that's something that we'll have to work through with the policies, with the board, and probably with you as council as well.
Those policies are set to be reviewed no later than February, correct?
Every 2 years in February is the schedule we're on for that renewal, and it's something that we could start a little earlier if we needed to.
Mayor, Council, that's the report. So there's your information. It's your decision on how you like to proceed. Eric has been in conversation with the planning board chair as a result of this finding. So they have been, the board will be placed on notice regarding policy. And I think it's important to know that those policies do need to be adhered to. That's why we have policies. What should be in there is, and what I will recommend to staff to present to the planning board, is that there should be a process when it's not followed. What is that? What takes place when that doesn't, when there is a violation of that policy? As I said, as Eric said, there is not one currently. So really the decision is up to you, council, on how you would like to proceed.
I will say that regardless of the decision that the council makes on proceeding or not proceeding, it was a vote of 6-1. What was said was said. I will say, yeah, Mr. Cousins, was there anything that Mr. Dubois said that was factually inaccurate or conjecture, in your opinion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd rather staff not weigh in on that. I think that if that is a question or a concern, then I believe the council should take the step and send this back to the planning board for a new hearing.
Mm-hmm. Leave it up to the council.
I would move that we remand it back to the planning board for consideration under the policies and rules of their board, so that this is a clean transaction. I had no problem with the rezoning based on its compliance with the comp plan, and I believe with the 2010 comp plan. I prefer this kind of smaller incremental rezoning as opposed to massive rezonings of huge tracts of land. This is actually how we've operated in the past, so that would be a motion.
Okay, so we got a motion, just to summarize. You can always come back and make a statement, of course. So I got a motion right now to send this back to the planning board. I'm sorry?
Second.
Second, Councilor Staples. Okay, I'll open this up to debate. We have a motion that's been seconded. Council, debate, discussion. Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has this been fully vetted from our Conservation Agricultural Board? And what was their recommendation for this parcel and this zoning?
To my knowledge, it has not been, but there's nothing stating it should be. The ordinance and the charter is clear that any particular landowner, through a 25-person signature, can petition to have their zone changed without it being looked at by anybody other than the planning board and the city council. And the planning board did have their hearing and voted 6-1 to pass it. So, Councilor Moran?
Yeah, I tend to agree with my esteemed counselor, Rick Whiting. I want this to be a clean process, you know, and I'd rather take the extra step and make sure that, like the manager said, you know, we have policies, they should be followed. So I think that's my vote. It's the right way to go about it, is to take one step back so we can move forward properly.
Very good. I have a motion on the floor. I'll end debate at this time. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of sending this back to the planning board? I'm sorry, take that back. Point of order on my end. I have public comment. Public comment. Anybody from the public would like to speak on this? It wasn't a table, so it's not a privileged motion.
Good evening. My name's Jeffrey Harmon. I live at 34 Vista Drive in Auburn. I don't really have any comment about whether this should be rezoned or not. I didn't speak at the planning board meeting, but I was there for both the first and second reading. And I'd like to clarify what actually happened there. I think the summary that Eric gave is very high level, and it will not educate the public or the council about what actually occurred. So Mr. DuBois created the packet for his client. He came to the council, he presented that, to the planning board. He did the right thing. He recognized he had a direct conflict of interest because he had potentially a fiduciary benefit from this relationship. Unfortunately, he talked to the chair, and the chair told him, because they've done this in the past, he could do it. But I'd like to point out that, in actuality, the Maine municipal guidance to planning boards on legal issues clearly states when a board member, if they recognize that they have a conflict and there are local rules or procedures, the board member should follow them. And clearly, as been said, it's very clear in the rules for the planning board that the chair voted on when they enacted this the last time, who should have been familiar with them. It clearly says, quote, such members shall not communicate with other members of the board who are acting on an application petition and shall not address the board if they are party in interest who is potentially affected by the application or petition. And further, the Maine municipal guidance relative to the statute isn't, I don't think, as vague as has been presented to you. Maine municipal recognizes that 30A MRSA section 2605 doesn't have significant case law, but I will quote them. When a board member accuses themselves, to quote them, it probably does prohibit a board member, including alternate members, from representing another applicant who is seeking the board's approval or some other party to the proceeding. So potentially the action not only is a violation of the policy, the action may in fact be a violation of state statute. And then to speaking to the chairman giving such advice, Maine Municipal Association, quoting a 1989 case, Rushford versus Inhabitants of Town of York in Maine, their guidance about what the chairman said, because we've done it before, you can do it again. The case quotes, past mistakes do not give any administrative board the right to act illegally. So the problem here is, I think, whatever action you take, there needs to be a recommendation from legal counsel representing the city as to what the potential legal liability of the city is at this point. Potentially, illegal action was taken, and certainly rules violations took place as this was processed by the planning board. So at least one member of the planning board has a direct conflict of interest, and more than one member of the planning board may have a perceived conflict of interest, which under the City of Auburn ethics rules would prohibit them from being involved in the process going forward. So whatever action
Thank you very much. Your time is up.
Thank you.
We do have, thankfully, a motion on the floor to send this back to the planning board. At this time, I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor? Well, someone else wants to speak on this topic? Yeah. Please, by all means.
Good evening. My name is John Cleveland. I reside at 183 Davis Avenue. I'm going to speak just briefly. I concur with everything that Mr. Harmon has said, but I did want to emphasize a point. I was at the meeting as well where it occurred, and very clearly Mr. Dubois recused himself because he had a direct conflict. And in addition to what the guidelines are from the Maine Municipal, and I passed out a relevant section, under your own procedures and policies under Section 8, G is contact at the public meeting. It clearly states in there that an individual who states, a member of the board who states that they have a conflict must preferably leave the room, or at best, sit in the back of the room and not participate in any fashion in the process before the board. Now, it's unfortunate, at least Mr. Dubois did ask for guidance. I give him credit for that. But unfortunately, the chair, Mr. Sear, gave him bad advice. And as Mr. Harmon said, it doesn't negate the legal requirements here whatsoever because of the fact that he asked for advice. The issue here is, was your procedures violated or not? I don't think there's any question about that. Memo from your staff admits that they did as well. So it's an important rule. It's not incidental. The fact that a member of the sitting board gets there and goes before the board gives a suggestion there might be either a bias or favoritism because a member of the board is presenting it to the board he sits on. That's the reason why the rule is there, so that everybody has a fair shot at a presentation and that there's no undue favoritism being done. Therefore, I would recommend that you do due diligence. You should ask for a written legal opinion on the proper procedure going forward. I'm not commenting on whether it should be rezoned or not, but if we set a precedent that you can violate the rules and just forget about it and move ahead, you're going to create a difficult situation for yourself and future councils going forward. So I would strongly recommend that you get a legal written opinion to make sure that what you're doing is consistent with the law and your own procedures.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak about the motion to send this back to the planning board that's already been made prior to public comment? None being. At this point, ask for a vote. Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add an amendment to the motion.
You'd like to amend the motion?
I would like to add on the good former Mayor Cleveland to ask for a legal opinion and what the rules and procedures should be.
I have a motion to amend. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'd like to ask for a vote on the amendment on the motion first. All those in favor?
Can we clarify? My thought on it was that we would have a legal review of what occurred and then what we're proposing. In other words, the motion that I made.
That will come, yes.
That
That will,
part
that's
of
an
that?
amendment of that motion.
Okay.
So we do the motion first, and then we'll go to the original motion, okay? Now, I will say that before, since you brought that up, just for a point of clarification, we have had a review, internal review on this. I'm not sure what else there is to review through legal at X dollars per hour. I'll leave that up to the manager. Is there anything that can be reviewed? It's pretty clean. I think the council is making a motion to remedy that situation, potentially.
I think what Councilor Gary might be referring to is the process that you're about to take. Is that the best legal remedy for a policy violation? And so if that's the intent, then I would recommend that you move on that motion, and we will have a legal response. That is the steps that you're taking on referring it back to the planning board. Is that the appropriate step to take on a policy violation?
So someone in this, I want to make sure this is clear, because whenever you say legal, that opens up something. Now, according to the manager, if we take this motion to amend, it almost voids out the initial motion, Councilor Whiting. It would then wait for a legal opinion to come back versus sending it back to planning board. In other words, the manager, and correct me if I'm wrong, the manager stated they'll look and search for a legal opinion of what to do next, not to do anything next. Councilor Whiting?
We could amend my motion to add language that it would be subject to legal review. And that way the motion could proceed, assuming the attorney found that our process was legitimate.
Councilor Gary, are you in agreement to that friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Come.
I'll second that just for.
Second, thank you. I'm just thinking about the procedure here. We have a second on the motion to amend, which is to make it subject to legal review. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to ask for a vote on the motion to amend the original motion, making it subject to legal review. All those in favor? All those opposed? None being. Okay, so the motion is amended. I'd like to ask for a vote at this time for the original motion as amended, to send this back to planning board based upon, or subject to legal review, and as quick as possible time. I have a motion. I ask for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous. 7-0. Okay. You gotta love precedents. You always get to set some new precedents that you don't even think of. Good job. Okay. And I think, obviously, along with this will come some counseling to the chair of the planning board on following policy. Moving on to the last open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue that is directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Please step to the podium. Give us your name and address, and limit your comments to about 3 minutes. Is there anybody that would like to speak? None being, I'd like to close this second open session. We're going to go into reports. Excuse me, mayor's reports. I need to ask the body, the council, and I'd like to give it a couple weeks. We have an opening in the airport board. I'll let the manager speak about staff appointments if he'd like, but I do need to appoint a counselor to this airport board. So think about this. If you have any questions, contact myself, the manager, and or staff per manager's direction. Okay, so whoever wants that wonderful flying opportunity, please let me know. School board, we have an upcoming meeting on Wednesday. I want to give you all a heads up. We are now really focusing on budget. There's an agenda item, which is closing Lake Street School. And we have done a lot of due diligence, financial and educational due diligence on this. It was a unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to do so. We'll have all the information will come out in Wednesday's meeting, of course, but I will say that it's under 10 kids. The vast majority do not live in Auburn, and the economics aren't there, but there's an alternate source and way to educate these children at a higher, better level, more economically. So the school committee is looking at the budget, looking at how we're delivering services. If they decide to close the school down, that property then will revert back to the city. The council will be responsible for disposing of that property or keeping it, whatever they wanted, whatever you all want to do. I do want to give you the heads up on that. Also, as a follow-up on the school committee, we are moving very smartly, Councilor Moore and myself, along with an ad hoc group from the school department on dual enrollment. This is going back to the initial policy that you, not policy, but not an order, but the other resolution that you all passed, encouraging dual enrollment, encouraging students to get certificates of value, trade, and so forth while in high school, utilizing Central Maine Community College and other post-secondary partners. We should have something to present to you in the joint City Council School Committee workshop on 12/19. That's the goal. So we are moving towards accomplishing the goals and the intent of your resolution. That's all I have to report on that. I'll turn it over to council at this time, starting on my right this time, Councilor Gary. Moving along, any type of committee reports you might have.
I have no committee report, but I did go to a very dear and a very great Thanksgiving dinner put on by the age-friendly group at the Auburn Community Senior Center. And the good mayor helped serve the dinner. It was well attended. And the volunteers that were there, they worked their hearts out to make sure that everybody got enough food. They were welcomed, and they felt part of a family, those that didn't have a family. And so the age-friendly and Councilor Walker should be commended for the hard work and their dedication that they have for the community.
Very good. Councilor Whiting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a 911 meeting there last week, and our big discussion is talking about where would we move the 911 to. So that'll be something that will go on. They are looking at a couple places right now. I won't say where. That'll be up to the manager when he's ready to say whatever the place is we pick to go. But that's what we're looking at. Hopefully, within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll have a home to move them out of the cellar of the old fire station and have a beautiful home for them. Thank you.
Councilor Staples? Mr. Manager.
Just a couple items. First, the Legislative Policy Committee, which is part of Maine Municipal Association, has prepared their list of legislative actions to move forward with the incoming legislators that will be coming in. We are monitoring several different bills that we believe will be put forward. Many of those have to do with general assistance, tax stabilization, marijuana, changes from medical to adult recreational use. So there's a lot of work that's being done at that level. We hope to move forward with several of those proposed legislative actions. Speaking of legislative actions, I have requested that our incoming legislators for Auburn representatives to come to your December 19th meeting. So I'm still confirming with a couple of those, but I hope that we will have them here for your meeting. That'll be the same meeting as the mayor mentioned. That will be a joint meeting with the school department during the workshop. So that'll be your first opportunity to talk about budget with the school committee as they get underway, as well as the city. So if you have specific goals or thoughts regarding that, that will be the meeting for you to start having that conversation with your school committee members. And that is it.
This could be a long meeting, and it's an ugly sweater meeting, FYI. No more reports. I'm at this time going to move into adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, motion, Councilor Saber, Councilor Walker. All those in favor say aye. Nay? We're adjourned.